Hello everybody, welcome back to another Borderlands 2 video. And today we're going to be doing a shotgun tier list oh, okay, don't know why I did that. But anyway, we're going to be looking at shotguns today on the vanilla game and ranking them accordingly. Also, if you see my mouse kind of going off the screen and whatnot, I do have some other tabs open on my other monitor, just some notes for some of the guns so I don't forget stuff. So yeah, that's why. But moving on, let's just get started. First, we have the unique Hyperion shotgun, the 1340. This is the gun that shoots, or sorry, that shoots, that talks when you shoot it. Um, I forget what the quest is, but it's that one in the Bloodshot Stronghold where you help the robot and you can choose to make it into a gun. And we're going to start this list off strong with a straight garbage tier. This weapon is horrific. This is literally the equivalent of a common Hyperion shotgun. The only difference is obviously the skin and the fact that it talks. But if we're talking purely from a performance standpoint, it legitimately might be the worst weapon on here. It's up there at least. It's gonna be one of the worst. Obviously, the garbage tier solidifies that. Moving on though, we have the Blockhead. Now this is a much better weapon. This weapon is obtained from like the Minecraft or like the Minecraft little Easter egg where you kill the badass creeper and he can drop it. And this weapon benefits from grenade damage. It has like a bit of a square spread. It like shoots in like it's kind of like these somewhat slow moving projectiles that are like in a square. And it's surprisingly effective. This weapon kind of seems like a joke, but it's actually really good. And it is a TDR, but you don't use it for chucking. You just shoot it. I think this weapon, particularly with like Axton with his grenade damage buffs, he can really boost this weapon. And Krieg can use it quite effectively as well. I really like it on both of them, but I think it's actually quite good on any character. It's got high enough DPS to where even if you don't have grenade damage buffs, it'll still perform pretty admirably. So I think I'll put this solidly in the A tier. This is a really strong weapon. And you can of course increase the projectile counts with that vertical grip and increase its damage even more. Okay, moving on. We have the Butcher. Now, the Butcher is a very, very good Pearl shotgun. And the biggest problem you're going to have with the Butcher is getting a Butcher that has the vertical grip, because if any shotgun needs a vertical grip, it's this one. Like, there's a few on here that really need it as well, but the Butcher's damage drops significantly without the vertical grip because it has a very low projectile count to begin with. So if you can get that vertical grip and use this weapon the way it's supposed to be used, it has insane damage. Very high fire rate, very accurate for, it's good at long range, mid range, close range, it doesn't matter. It's highly accurate. Fire rate's fantastic. And on top of that, it has its unique ability to regenerate ammo randomly while you're shooting. So you can end up just shooting this thing like 50 times without having to reload. It's incredibly ammo efficient, very solid DPS. This is just a really good shotgun, and it's going to be in the S tier. I love the Butcher. It's just satisfying to use when you have this like shooting like 10 bullets per second nonstop. It's pretty fun. Okay, moving on though, we have the Carnage. Um, the Carnage is an interesting one. It gets some buffs in the UCP, which I like, but this weapon is still decent on the vanilla game as well. The thing that does suck about the Carnage, it doesn't receive any grenade or launcher damage boost. Technically, the Carnage shoots like rocket launcher shots, but it's not boosted by launcher damage skills, and it's also not boosted by grenade damage skills. So that is unfortunate. It could be boosted by shotgun damage skills, though, of course, like Krieg Salt the Wound, and this is the character it's best on anyways. Krieg with Salt the Wound plus Bloodbath, because interestingly, the launcher, well, not interestingly, the launcher will proc Bloodbath, so you never have to switch. And it's quite good on Krieg because he has such like insane fire rate, reload speed, and magazine size buffs that you can just spray with this weapon and it'll just churn through everything with the Bloodbath buffs. But I'd say on Krieg, this is like close to an S tier. But the problem is on every other character, I don't even think it's close to an S tier. Krieg really, really maximizes the potential of this weapon, but it really kind of falls short on other characters, unfortunately, just because they don't have the buffs to bring out the best in this weapon. So with that being said, I think it wouldn't be fair to put it super high. I think B tier is fine because I think it's a pretty good weapon on other characters. Like it's not bad, but on Krieg it's amazing. But I think generally speaking, the Blockhead and Butcher will easily outperform the Carnage on every other character. Excuse me. Okay. The conference call. The conference call is a pretty notorious weapon in the Borderlands community. Um, I don't really think a lot needs to be said about this. This weapon is definitely S tier. It's pretty good at a lot of things. It's good for certain raid bosses. Um, it's good for mobbing. It just does everything well. It has good synergy with the B with all of its projectiles. Um, this is just a very, very high damage shotgun. It's accurate. It's got good fire rate. It doesn't really have much of a weakness. It's not great at close range because you want to get all those projectiles hitting together at once because of the way it works with those horizontal projectiles meeting the vertical projectiles. Um, so you kind of want to be at mid to long range. But like when you're finding the sweet spot with this weapon, its damage is through the roof. It's really good for bossing, mobbing. It doesn't matter. Like this thing will do some crazy good damage. And I think its particular synergy with like Gauge and Zero puts it even higher. I think you can get some bore going with Conference Call, and Gauge in particular, like just kills everything with the Conference Call. I mean, the ricocheting projectiles just go everywhere. Uh, this gun is definitely S tier, and it's really good on every character. And it's tough for me. I don't know which one I'd put ahead of the other here. Um, the Conference Call is better for raiding than the Butcher easily, but the Butcher is a much better mobbing weapon, I'd say. A little bit more ammo efficient. I think I'll give the edge to the Conference Call though, just because it's still a good mopping weapon without sacrificing too much ammo efficiency, and it's very good at raiding as well, which the Butcher can't really compete with that as much. Okay, now moving on, we have the Deliverance, which is a TDR shotgun. When you throw it, it will seek out enemies and shoot them and chase them down and then explode. The projectiles that it shoots when you throw it, like while it's chasing them down, can actually be boosted by the bee, which is a funny little interaction. Um, Using the gun without reloading it, though, pretty low damage. Um, Low pellet count. It's obviously not ammo efficient if you're throwing it, so I don't know. There's better TDR chucking weapons than this. This one's just kind of fun to use, though. You can just literally throw a bunch of them out and they'll go track down everything and kill it for you. And, if you're using the bee, it actually will have pretty high damage. Overall, though, it's just kind of a gimmick weapon that's fun to use. Um, and it's very ammo inefficient because you just have to spam throw this thing like 100 times for it to do something. So I'm not a huge fan. I think it's fun. If we were purely grading off fun, it would probably be S tier, but its viability, I think it's just kind of average. Like you can make this work, but it has some significant drawbacks, and you're just gonna run out of ammo uh, pretty damn quickly. I don't think it's. I would rather have the Carnage. I think it's firmly like it's just kind of an average weapon. You can make it work, and it's got some cool mechanics. Moving on though, this is the Dog, which is a unique bandit shotgun. So the Dog has increased damage, fire rate, and mag size compared to other bandit shotguns, but it does not have a unique spread. You'll notice that a lot of the unique shotguns, um, particularly the blue ones for whatever reason, seem to have the unique firing patterns more often than not. The Dog doesn't, but this weapon's actually pretty good. It's just solid, and I think that's honestly the best way to put it. I don't think it's definitely not like A or S tier, but I think it could be argued for the B tier just because this weapon's gonna be pretty dang good on any character. It's not going to blow you away. Like you kind of know what you're getting from this weapon. It kind of is what it is, and it just does its job pretty well. It's a pretty high damage shotgun with a good fire rate and good mag size. So you can just, you know, if you're mobbing and you're running through a room, you'll be able to shoot quite a bit, get some kills without having to reload. Bandit shotguns in particular are pretty good for that ammo efficiency. So yeah, I like the shotgun. I think it's pretty good, easy to acquire, and it's just a solid weapon. And I think the B tier is where it belongs. Because I think for me, when I'm looking at the C tier, I'm just looking at meh, like very average weapon, like or almost below average. Just it's just like kind of it exists. It's an option. But I think the dog is better than just meh. Like it's actually viable. Okay, moving on. So I just combine all of these into one. These are the E-Tech splat guns, and I combine them all into one because they all suck. Uh, more like put simply, I don't like these at all. Um, they're not very high damage. They're ammo inefficient. You also need to have the well, depending on the weapon, but you need the prefix to have the ×3 projectiles to even make them viable at all. I mean, they are terrible with one projectile. And even with three, they're not that impressive. These are just not good. I really can't say much more than that. They're not very fun to use, low damage, not very ammo efficient. Their fire rate's usually not even that good. They're just pretty bad across the board. I would not recommend these. I mean, maybe in the early game you can get some use out of it, but I could like think of just about any shotgun that I'd want um, over them. I guess it would be too harsh to put the 1340 in front of it because it's literally a common white shotgun that can't have any elements. So it's really bad, but I'll give it the edge over the 1340, but it's still not good. Okay, next we have the flacker. This is an interesting one, and first of all, this weapon benefits from gun splash damage, not grenade, which means it can be boosted by Maya's Reaper, which is quite nice, and Zero's Be Like Water skills. So this weapon is kind of a weird one, and I'm not entirely sure how to grade it fairly, because this weapon, it's really only like good when you're abusing game mechanics. This weapon is good when you're playing like somebody with a very high weapon speed swap, like Axton or Krieg, for example. They can swap weapons incredibly fast. And basically, what you would do with Krieg or Axton is you would fire it, swap to another weapon, swap back, fire it again. And by doing that, you're actually increasing the fire rate. You're like skipping the flacker's like incredibly long animation it has after a shot. So usually when you shoot the flacker, it takes like a solid few seconds before you can shoot it again. By swapping rapidly, you're bypassing that mechanic. So if you do that, I mean, this weapon's DPS is legitimately close to unrivaled. It is disgustingly strong. But if you're not doing that, if you're just shooting it, um, normally not abusing the game mechanic, it's not that good. Like its damage is good, but you need to be point blank, and it's such a slow fire rate that it's hard to justify it. Um, I don't know. This one's really tough for me. Maybe you guys can tell me. I mean, the potential of the weapon is like S tier. Like if you really know how to use this weapon, it can literally kill so fast. But again, it requires the abuse of game mechanics, so it's a bit tough. Um, yeah, I don't really know what I'm gonna do with this one, honestly. I think it's sort of unfair to compare it to a lot of these. Um, we'll put it we'll put it like A tier maybe because I don't know. I think it's unfair to put a weapon that requires you to like play certain characters or abuse certain game mechanics. Like I think it'd be unfair to put that in S tier because that means it's not a good weapon on every character. It requires a specific parameter. Um, and the reason it's so high though is because if you are taking advantage of what this weapon can do, its DPS is legitimately ridiculous. Um, so I think for that reason, it deserves that A tier spot. but it's only viable on, like, I'd say particularly Axton and Krieg. Other characters can do it too, as long as they have good weapon swap speed. But those two in particular um, can do a lot of damage with this weapon, like a lot of damage. So I'll give it that. But if, I guess the best way to say it would be, if we're talking about abusing game mechanics, this is S tier. If we're just using it normally, it's probably C or D tier. It's just too slow. But we'll move on from that because I could talk about the flacker for a while. All right, next we have the heartbreaker. It is always a fire element. It is a moxie weapon. Increased projectile count and fire rate, 50% bonus crit damage, but it has reduced pellet damage and magazine size. And it also fires in a heart-shaped pattern, so it's better against like wider enemies, typically, which is kind of ironic because wider enemies are typically going to be loaders, and it's a fire weapon. But that doesn't really matter as long as you're close enough. I've never really noticed a problem with the spread with this weapon. Like it does great damage. Uh, and it isn't kidding when it's like says it's an increased fire rate. This weapon fires really fast, really high fire rate, nice projectile count. The crit damage is great. It's a very accurate shotgun since it's Hyperion, so you can consistently get that bonus crit damage. And you're healing while you're using it the whole time. This is an awesome weapon. I actually like this a lot on every character. It's very strong, just about any build, and it has some particular strong synergies with like Hellborn Krieg. I like it a lot on that. I like it on some Axton builds. Yeah, I mean, I'll use this on just about any character. It's easy to get, which also helps. But yeah, this is possibly an underrated, very powerful shotgun. I don't think it's S tier because I don't think it has the same capabilities of these two, but I'll put it at the top of A tier. I think it's um, the Blockhead's like better on Axton than the Heartbreaker, for example, but the Heartbreaker is more generally good than the Blockhead. I'd say this weapon's quite close to S tier. I like it a lot. It's good. And being a Moxie weapon is always a huge, huge benefit. Okay, so next we have the Hydra. Very low mag size, which means it's going to be good with like Zero, for example. Get that one shot, one kill. But it has very high damage. It has a very strange firing pattern where it's basically like horizontal. Like it just kind of spreads out horizontally. Doesn't really go vertical at all. Which means you have to be extremely close for all the pellets to hit, and it's really bad against like humans. It's very good against loaders because you can hit both crit spots at once with this thing. It can be pretty good against like I guess like maybe like a skag or like a maybe even a dragon. Um, Something like that would be pretty good, but you need to be very, very close, which is a significant drawback. And even when you are very close, I would still say some of the other Jacobs shotguns, like the quad, do rival this weapon in terms of DPS and consistency. So it's not the best, but it's not bad. And I know that some Deputy Sal players use the Hydra for raiding. It can have extremely high DPS in the right scenario. But yeah, I don't think I can put this too high. I think I'd put it B tier because when it's in like the perfect scenario, it does pretty well. Like you need to be super close. Certain characters utilize this better than others, like Zero, like Salvador. But I think I'd definitely put it below the flacker because if the flacker's put in the right scenario, it can literally out DPS anything in the game. Like it can rival it. If the Hydra's put in the right scenario, it can just rival other guns' DPS. So I think I'll put it at the bottom of B because I think it's slightly above average. Like it can be really good if used properly. But again, too many limitations and drawbacks to bring out the best of this weapon. Okay, next we have the interfacer. I think most people know about the interfacer. It's very difficult to acquire. Um, and that is unfortunately the biggest drawback of the weapon. But if you have the weapon, it is a killing machine. This weapon has a sweet spot because basically what happens is you shoot it and these projectiles come from the side and converge together. So if you're in the right, if you're at the right range, ideally what will happen is you'll hit them in the face straight on, and then those other bullets will also converge on their face for massive amounts of damage. And this is also a well-known raiding weapon. it does a ton of damage if you're in that sweet spot. And it's easier to use in raids because the enemies are bigger, so the likelihood of those projectiles hitting is higher. And you're also able to space yourself a little bit better in raids because it's planned out. Um, the biggest drawback to this weapon is it's not very good for general mobbing. You're not just going to walk around with the interfacer most of the time because it is insanely ammo inefficient. This thing churns through ammo, but its damage potential is insane. It's up there with the conference call in terms of what it can do with rating. So I think the two guns currently in the S tier are pretty damn good at everything. I think the interfacer is in that category as well. It's just a little bit more ammo inefficient than both of those guns. I still think I mean, it's better than the A tier weapons. Its DPS, its fire rate, its accuracy is fantastic. It has a bit of a learning curve, but if you can master it, its DPS is truly exceptional. But again, a little bit ammo inefficient is why I would have it slightly lower than these two. If we're talking about purely rating though, it would definitely be above the Butcher and probably above the conference call. It depends on the raid though or the situation. Okay, interfacer, now we have the Jolly Roger. Jolly Roger is another one of these unique bandit shotguns. Apparently, Gearbox really likes these, and what's funny about a lot of these bandit uniques is they're pretty damn similar. The Jolly Roger does have a unique firing pattern. It is like a skull and crossbones, and it has an increased pellet count, and it's very, very ammo efficient. It has a really large magazine size and consumes 3 ammo per shot, so you can just walk around a room, kill multiple enemies without having to reload, and then then you can reload because everything's dead. I like this weapon. I think it's pretty damn good. And I think I'd put it definitely above the dog. I think it outperforms the dog. The dog is a pretty good one, but the ammo efficiency of the Jolly Roger and its firing pattern is surprisingly good, especially on like the right enemies. It can do really well against loaders. You can get multiple crits. It's pretty good against humans too. And that increased pellet count that it has is a big buff to the damage. So I think I'll put it at the top of B. This is tough. I would actually maybe put this in A tier. I think this weapon's actually really solid and underrated. Um, I think every character can get something out of this weapon. It doesn't require any specific setup. And it just does its job really well. Um, I think I actually will put it in A tier. I'll put it right here, right next to the blockhead. I think I'd give the edge to the blockhead because of its higher DPS potential. But the Jolly Roger is just, it's one of those weapons it's just so solid. Like it's just such a consistent option, which would make you think it's B, but I think it's just so good. I don't know. It's tough to explain it, but like if you haven't used this weapon, you definitely should. It doesn't really look flashy, like based off the statistics and things like that, but once you use this weapon, you'll kind of understand. Like the damage is really nice. Not having to reload like at all is also really nice. So yeah, I'd recommend you give it a shot. It's a good one. Landscaper. This weapon is horrible. Uh, Maybe even below the 1340. Oh man, where to even begin? So just reading the stat card, reduced pellet count and fire rate, but with increased damage. Projectile spread forms the 4 points of a square and then sticks to an inert surface. Then the stuck rounds will detonate with an enemy in the vicinity or after 6 seconds. This weapon is just it sounds kind of cool in theory, but holy shit, it's so painful to use and it's so bad. The fire rate is pretty shit. Um, this whole like having to wait for enemies to come like near the sticky grenades on the ground. Oh, it's so bad. The damage isn't good enough. The fire rate isn't good enough. Like it just sucks. This thing just sucks. It is a very, very bad weapon. And yes, I think I would actually take the 1340 over it because of how annoying this gun is to use. Like you have to plan it out almost. It's just ridiculous. Okay. Next we have the octo. Um, this is kind of a interesting one. It's all right. It reminds me of the omen in the sense that it shoots in like it's kind of like a grid pattern, I guess, and then it converges inwards as it travels, which is what the omen does. And then, so that makes it kind of a better mid to long range shotgun. But that's kind of where the similarities to the omen go, like stop. It doesn't rival the DPS of the omen at all, and it doesn't benefit from grenade damage like the omen. It has worse mag size, worse fire rate, and reload speed than the omen. Uh, And honestly, the grenade damage of the Omen is a big selling point and why it's good in the first place. So not having that is really hurts. On top of the fact that it's worse at everything else. So um, I think this is, I think it's D. I think this is below average. I think it's not just meh, like it's actually pretty bad. It's usable, but I mean I would easily take, I mean pretty much everything over it. Like there's a few here left that maybe I won't, but it's just not great. Just doesn't do anything special. Okay, well next up we actually have the Omen, which I was just talking about. This is a good weapon. It benefits from grenade damage. It has that converging, like it's more of like a circular spread that converges inwards as it travels. It benefits from grenade damage, has a very nice fire rate, pretty solid reload speed, high damage, pretty accurate from short, mid, and long range. Maybe not long, but definitely short mid. Um, this is just a very solid weapon. I like this weapon quite a bit. The grenade damage gives it a nice boost on Krieg and Axe, but it's still really good on other characters because of its high fire rate and damage. I've used it on like Gage and Maya, and they perform really well with it too. I think I would put it kind of in the blockhead tier. It's another one of those weapons where the grenade damage it would put it like higher for Axton and Krieg, but on every other character, it's still really good, but not quite at its maximum potential. So I think I'd put it right around the top of A tier. It's a good weapon. The Orphan Maker. This is an interesting one. Another one of those that requires abusive game mechanics in the case of Salvador. Salvador, with his dual wielding, can use the Orphan Maker without taking damage from it. That's the drawback of the Orphan Maker. It hurts you when you shoot it. Salvador can completely negate that, and as a result, he can just shit out damage with no consequence with a Deputy Sal build. The base damage of this weapon is through the roof. The fire rate is pretty high. It's a low mag size, fire as fast as you can pull the trigger kind of gun. But yeah, so I mean, if we're talking about Salvador, I think it's pretty easily S tier. It's insanely strong because he doesn't have to deal with the downside. Also quite good on zero though with deception. Uh, it has perfect synergy with one shot, one kill because you're reloading so frequently and getting that benefit. So zero can go in deception, kunai, and then just one shot, and he can heal the damage off through transfusions and more deceptions. So he can take pretty good advantage of it, but other characters, you're probably just going to end up killing yourself too quickly to actually get good use out of this. For Zero and Sal, I'd probably put it, like pretty much S tier, but other characters bring it down a pretty big notch. I still think it's good, but you have to really be careful about the management of the weapon. I think I'll put it. I think I'll put it next to the flacker because it's another one of these weapons that requires the abusive game mechanics to really get the most out of, which is kind of unfortunate, but that is the case. And it's also similar to the flacker in that it's particularly strong on one or two characters and then not as good on the others. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Okay. Next up, we have the quad, which a lot of people probably know about. This is another kind of Deputy Sal weapon, but the difference of this, like it's similar to the Orphan Maker. It's just a very high damage, high fire rate, low magazine size shotgun that's quite accurate as well. But it doesn't hurt you like the Orphan Maker, and for that reason alone, it jumps up. Obviously for Salvador that doesn't matter, but like the quad has more general viability um, than the Orphan Maker because you're not hurting yourself and you're not losing out on that much DPS either. Like this thing could seriously put out some damage. I don't think it's S tier just because the weapons in the S tier are so versatile and really like good at a lot of things. The quad is just kind of it is what it is. It's just high damage. Um, I think A tier is fair because it is really good at what it does, and there's not a lot of drawbacks to it. I think I'd prefer it over the Orphan Maker because, again, it's not going to hurt me when I use it, and that means more characters can use it effectively. Um, I think right in this range, kind of mid to low A tier. Um, I'll put it right behind the Jolly Roger. I really like the Jolly Roger. I think the Jolly Roger is a really strong gun, and it's of course has the elemental advantage, and I think a general better mobbing capability because of its magazine size. Whereas the quad is like a one-shot, one-kill weapon that's really good on like Zero and Salvador. It's really, really good on those two. On those two, you can easily, I think, throw it up there in the S tier for them. Like they just make such good use of it. It's perfect for their kit. That's why it's kind of hard to do these tier lists for all the characters because we have to kind of take into account um, what the weapon can do for every single character. Okay, I'm trying to speed this up a little bit. This is taking a while, but I'm just trying to be thorough, and there's a lot of unique shotguns. So the Ravager, this is just a non-unique explosive toric shotgun. I included it because it's actually just really good. This thing does insane damage, um, and it also benefits from grenade damage, which is really nice for Accident Krieg yet again. Has low fire rate and intense like ammo consumption as well, and you really need to be close to maximize its potential. Those are kind of the drawbacks, but for a simple purple or blue Ravager, the amount of damage that this thing can put out is really, really respectable. Um, I think, hmm, possibly a B or A. I don't. I think B is fair. I think I actually would take it over the Carnage just because the Carnage is getting most of its viability from Krieg, whereas the Ravager is going to be quite good on any character at pretty much any point in the game. I'd say it's close to A tier, but I think all of these weapons are a little bit more unique and provide something a little bit more special. Okay, let's see. Have the wretcher. Um, okay, yeah, the wretcher is an interesting one. It's just an E-Tech splat gun, which I put in the garbage tier earlier, but it only consumes one ammo per shot, and it has arcing projectiles. It's always corrosive, needs the gentle prefix for extra projectiles. Um, Zero can help this weapon out a little bit because he has velocity and precision, which will help you with the arcing projectiles. But it's not very powerful, even with that in mind. Yeah, I don't think it's garbage tier, but it's not very good. It just doesn't do enough damage. And the splat gun in general is just so painful to use, especially if you're not playing Zero, where you can't fix some of these problems. It's just not fun, not good. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording for a moment, but I will be right back to finish this up. All right, and we are back. Sorry about that, guys. Had to stop midway through, had to do a few things, but now we are back, and I will finish this up. So, we are with the rock salt now. This is another pretty good bandit shotgun. It has increased reload speed, accuracy, damage, and fire rate. It outperforms most bandit purple shotguns like the standard ones. It's pretty close to the dog in terms of its performance, the other bandit shotgun we have here. But I think the Jolly Roger is still pretty handily above it. So I think it's almost preference. I honestly haven't used the two of these weapons enough to really give one the edge. So I think I've used the dog. Yeah, no, I've definitely used the dog more. And from my experience, it's a pretty powerful weapon. So I'll put it below the dog because I enjoy using it. But the rock salt's a pretty strong weapon that maybe I've overlooked a little bit. Um, the few times I've used it, it's been pretty solid. And I've seen other people use it on YouTube and just, whatever using the weapon, and it actually seems to be quite strong. So this may be a weapon I'll revisit, and it could move up or down the tier list accordingly, but it has some nice buffs. The biggest difference between it and the dog is that the dog has, I believe, just a better mag size. So the rock salt, on the other hand, has better reload speed though. So they kind of have good DPS, but different reasons. So the rock salt will be better on characters that have an increased mag size, and the dog would be better on characters that have increased reload speed. So, yeah. Next up, we have the Sledge's shotgun. This is a pretty good one. I like the Sledge's shotgun. So, the Sledge's shotgun fires a burst of 2 shots per trigger pull, with a long delay between each burst. It has a +2 projectile count as well. Basically, this weapon has extremely high burst damage, but it is extremely ammo inefficient. It churns through the ammo a lot faster than you would think because it has a really, really high fire rate. But this weapon's really good. I really like it on Zero. Zero's really good with shotguns in general because of precision, velocity, um, fast hands. Just he has so many like DPS skills that synergize well with shotguns, and the Sledge shotgun is no exception. So, not to mention that it's actually quite good on every other character. It's generally just a strong gun. Like I like this gun, and I think it deserves a little bit more love. I think it's limited primarily by its ammo inefficiency, and it's really definitely a close range weapon. It's not that great for mid range. I think I would put it right above the Jolly Roger. I think it's slightly better than the Jolly Roger in terms of DPS. Has a fantastic mag size, great fire rate, so that puts it slightly above the Jolly Roger to me. You could definitely argue putting it over the Omen and Blockhead, but I really like using those weapons, and I think their DPS potential is greater and their ammo efficiency is way better. So moving on, we have the Slow Hand. This is a Moxie E-Tech splat gun, but unlike other splat guns, the projectiles are a little bit easier to predict. They don't really dip down, they don't arc or anything like the Wretcher, for example. They pretty much just go straight. There's a slight drop, but it's negligible. And of course, being a Moxie weapon is already a huge advantage. The healing that you get from the slow hand is nice. The slow hand is also an underrated slagging weapon. If you get a slag slow hand with the casual or prefix or whatever it is for the ×3, it's really, really good at slagging and it'll keep you healed. It's actually one of my favorite slag weapons on Gauge because of close enough and all that ricochet stuff. I'll basically just pull it out, shoot it a few times, and everything is slagged, and I keep myself healed with it. It's pretty solid. But the only thing that holds this back is you must get the vertical grip accessory so you can get the ×3 projectiles. Without the ×3 projectiles, this weapon is pretty trash, which holds it back. But ideally, you'd be using it with the vertical grip, and if you do, I think it's solidly in the A tier. It's pretty good at close range, mid range, and even long range. It's really good with like the Quasar or like Maya's Phase Lock. It does really well with something that can like pull things together because it has a very nice splash damage and it'll just kind of blow up everything. It's a very, very good mobbing weapon, but it's not very good at bossing. So for that reason, I can't put it in the S tier because it just doesn't excel at everything, but it is a very, very solid weapon. Next up, we have the Striker. Now the Striker almost functions more like a sniper. It has 50% additive crit bonus and a 15% multiplicative crit bonus, and in addition to that, it has exceptional accuracy and a pretty minuscule spread. And it also has increased weapon zoom when you aim down sight at the cost of slightly reduced damage. It's pretty good. I think it's outperformed by the other higher DPS Jacob shotguns such as the Orphan Maker, the Quad, and the Twister, but it's still really good and it kind of helps up. Like, let's say for example you're running an all shotgun build, for example. I think this would be a nice one to have because it's really good at medium to long range where most shotguns are not. There's a few, but this one can fill that niche while also providing some good damage, and it's quite nice with like Zero, for example, because of all of his crit bonuses. So I don't think this one's quite A tier because I think it's below all of the Jacob shotguns up there, but I do think it's a pretty good one. I think I will put it like kind of this upper B tier area. Me personally, I'd rather have the Ravager because the DPS, I think the DPS potential on the Ravager is way higher. But the Striker's still a good gun, and it's pretty fun to use as well. Okay, next up we have the Sword Splosion. The Sword Splosion is really fun and really good. So, Sword Splosion benefits from both gun and grenade splash damage, which is very nice. And then basically the way this thing works is it shoots swords that blow up into little mini swords. And yet again, it's another one of these weapons that needs the casual prefix because then you'll shoot 3 swords that blow up into mini swords. And they do very high damage. So with the casual prefix, this gun's DPS is potential is through the roof. I think this thing is really good. Um, and it's actually really good on like every character. Like you don't need to be playing an explosive build to make this thing work. If you are, that's great. But if you aren't, it doesn't matter because this thing still puts out major damage. Unlike other shotguns though, on this list, I mean, this is probably the only one where you literally absolutely cannot use it close range. All the other ones, it's probably okay if you use it close. You may not be using it to its max potential, but this one you absolutely cannot because you'll just kill yourself. So medium to long range shotgun that does excellent DPS. I think this is very close to S tier for me. I think it outperforms everything in the A tier in terms of DPS. It's got great fire rate. It's got great accuracy if you know how to use it correctly. Um, yeah, just everything about this thing is really good. It's obviously not a good rating weapon, but I just think it's so good for just about every other situation. I'm going to put it in the bottom of the S tier. I really like this weapon, and I think there's some bias with that, but I just love this thing, and it's so good in so many situations. And plus, it's just badass. It shoots swords. That's pretty dope. Okay, moving on. Then we have the Teeth of Terramorphis, always incendiary. It fires 2 horizontal rows of 6 rounds each, and the 2 rows like rise and collapse, basically like you're opening and closing a mouth like teeth, and that happens after a specific distance. They like collapse into each other after a specific distance. When they collapse, they cause 6 small incendiary explosions and disappear. This does benefit from grenade damage, splash. So this weapon is actually one I'm probably going to do a test video on. I think it's a bit underappreciated on vanilla and UCP. Its DPS potential is actually quite high. The fire rate's really good, being a bandit. Magazine size is respectable. Fire rate is respectable. It's a pretty well-rounded one, and the grenade damage makes it a really nice choice on Krieg and Axton. So this weapon's quite solid. There is kind of like a sweet spot. It is a weird pattern that you kind of need to get used to, but overall, I think it's a very powerful weapon, and it is a bit underrated. It's tough. I think I would put it. I think I'd rather have it over the Ravager because the DPS potential is really high, the grenade damage boost is nice, and it has a little bit more versatility than the Ravager. You don't have to be so close. It has better fire rate, better mag size, all that kind of stuff. Um, it is a bit of a niche weapon because of the spread, though, so I think it kind of belongs in this flacker tier where it is a little bit more niche, but when used properly, it is excellent. And yeah, I'm definitely noticing we have a lot of A tier shotguns. Shotguns are just good in this game. I mean, it may seem weird to have so many, but really they are just good in this game. Um, you could probably argue putting a few of these down, but honestly, everything like B tier and above it really is solid. Like you can make them work. Anyway, last few ones here. We have the tidal wave. This is going straight to garbage tier. This thing sucks. Really bad. It's not good. I'd use it over the landscaper, but that's not saying much. Honestly, this whole bottom tier here, the garbage tier, they're unusable. They have, man, they're just so bad. And tidal wave's no exception. It has a horrible slow bullet spread that moves like a wave. It does terrible damage. Its fire rate isn't, I mean, it's a Jacobs, I guess, but it's not exactly going to blow you away. It doesn't matter what the fire rate is because the damage and the spread are horrific. just don't use this weapon unless you hate yourself. Okay, now we have the triquetra. This is not bad. It has increased damage and pellet count. It has a unique firing pattern of a triquetra. Just look that up if you don't know what it is, but it's a pretty tight little spread. This is similar to the hydra in the sense that it is really bad from long range, but it is quite solid if you're really, really close. But I think this is sort of at the bottom of the list of the Jacobs shotguns here. Let's see where we've got them here. We've got the striker. The hydra is here. I would definitely put it below the hydra. I think the hydra is similar in the sense that you only want to use it from close range, but it's better at close range. Um, this weapon isn't bad, but it's not really going to blow you away. I'll put it at the top of C tier. It's not bad. It's all right. You could argue low B tier, but I think I'll put it high C. All right, Twister. This weapon is incredible. This is easily S tier. I'll decide where in S tier here in a moment, but this weapon's just really good. Um, you the prefixes that you can use are flexible. You can do like crit, you could do the vertical grip. It's pretty good no matter what you do. It does have slow moving projectiles, but even then, it's actually not as hard to use from medium range. Not definitely not long range, but medium to close range, this weapon can definitely excel. You can still hit shots from medium range even though it's slow because of the way the spread is. It's such a large area that it covers that you're bound to hit a few shots anyway. Um, the Twister also does grenade damage, which means it's really good on accident. This weapon is disgusting on pretty much every character. I think that's why it's so good. It's definitely above the sword explosion, but it's good with Zero because you can use Boar with it. It has some interesting Boar interactions. With Krieg, you can proc Bloodbath with it, and it also just does an insane amount of damage with him. Same thing with Axton, you get all the grenade buffs to the Twister, great damage. It's good with Gauge, like really good with Gauge, because the projectiles ricochet everywhere, and you don't need to aim with it really, and it'll just murder everything. It's really good with Maya because she does good elemental damage and she can phase lock things and easily hit them with this weapon. I mean, it's just, this weapon is so good. It's not a very good rating weapon, but this isn't really a pure rating list. I think it's pretty ammo efficient, more so than the interfacer. And this is just kind of a favorite weapon of mine. I think the Twister just kicks ass. I think the Butcher and the Conference Call are a little bit more versatile than the Twister, so I'll put them ahead, but the Twister is amazing, and you could easily argue it is the best shotgun in the game. It's very good. Okay, lastly we have the Unicornsplosion. I'm not going to explain this one too much. I'm just going to put it right above the Sword Explosion. It's literally the Sword Explosion reskinned that does a little bit more damage. It's not exciting. It's just the same as the Sword Explosion. It's a good weapon. All right. And we finally made it through the list. This is going to be a really long video, but there's a lot of unique shotguns and a lot to say about these shotguns. And I wanted to make sure I covered it all. So I'll probably put some timestamps in the video for you guys to skip around because I doubt anyone will watch all of this. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed and I'll see you next time.